Our Economica class, we were required to spend a month helping Mr. Mad clean out an abandoned apartment tower in Cathedral City. Not just me, but everyone in the class. All 20 of us were required to help the cleanup of the tower that was recently purchased by Isaacs Industries. So we would be helping the cleanup crews clean up the tower, amongst other things. It was supposed to teach us the value of cleaning crews in making places livable after they were condemned. The background information of the Temperance Tower was far from simple. Originally, it was built 40 years ago, when it was considered both economical and fashionable to have both workers and their families live in apartments below the offices. It stood for a while longer, where the apartments were rented out and businesses subletted the offices. However, with an economic crash a little over a decade ago, no one was able to rent or sublet from the upper floors. So the people in the apartments started moving upstairs and putting their friends into the offices above. In time, the renters became squatters, and both the offices and apartments became filthy and broken down. About a year ago, the city triumvirate condemned Temperance Tower. Legally, everyone was evicted then. However, 6 months ago, the police led a massive raid and arrested over 200 squatters from Temperance Tower. That led to us now, a cleaning company that specialized in condemned buildings and crime scenes was hired to clean the building for the company. My father thought it was a good idea to have everyone in Economica to have hands-on experience in cleaning up such a condemned place. My father, who now owned the entire building, believed that kids didn't appreciate what went into work. So he pulled a few strings with Agamemnon, and next thing I knew, my summer break was going to be spent cleaning a condemned building. Mr. Mad just thought it was a fantastic idea. He taught us all about the economics of not just work, but also crime, capitalism, compassion, courts, creativity, and charity. He taught us about how businesses tended to externalize costs to the others outside to keep their business expenses low, such as car companies having government maintained roads when train companies had to pay for the rails, or where private schools would gleefully accept public funds but also fight tooth and nail to avoid low performing students. Or in this case, how Isaacs Industries outsourced the job of cleaning the entire building to a cleaning company instead of hiring cleaners to work full time. The same cleaning company who was now depending on 20 children to help with the cleaning operation without getting paid. Tavit, one of my homework projects was calculating how much money I was saving the cleaning company by my work. The student who saved the cleaning company the most money would get a pizza party at the end of the summer. I was certain they were pushing us to clean as much as possible to squeeze as much labor as they could out of us. Even a really, really nice pizza party with arcades, bowling, and unlimited soda for the entire class wouldn't be worth 700 denarii. If they were paying us at minimum wage, we would have made 12 denarii each by the end of the month. And they weren't paying for a pizza party for the entire class. They were paying for one person. So, some quick calculations, and assuming a nice pizza party at the James Amazing Pizza place, that would be a maximum of 50 centi of cost for them. Maybe an extra 25 if they were going to be generous with tokens. So it would cost them 0.75 denarii to receive 240 denarii worth of labor. There is my math, and that project done. And now all I had to worry about was providing 12 denarii worth of labor. When we made it to Temperance Tower, We all offloaded from the bus while Mr. Mad stood in front of the class and explained what we were going to do. Mr. Mad was dressed in a smart suit that was completely green. Even the tie and the undershirt are all the same shade of spring green. He also wore a hat that was the same shade of green, and like most teachers of the school, he wore a blank mask that looked like it was a phantom pantomime player. It was also the exact same shade of spring green as the rest of his suit, but his voice still boomed out from underneath the mask. As you can see, the Temperance Tower is behind us. Power, water, gas, internet, and even phone services have all been disconnected from the building. All squatters have been evicted from the building by local police, but they have left behind a very large mess, so that is where we come in. Each of you will be paired with a partner and assigned to one of the cleaners, who will teach you about the role they do. You will help out and remember your lessons I want you to learn. Occupational safety is no joke. Every single rule was paid for in blood. Every rule you are asked to follow was because someone was either severely hurt or even killed. So, the rules were written to keep you safe. Also, you will need to both calculate how much money you are saving the cleaning company, and the one of you who does the most work will get a pizza party for yourself at the end of the year, Mr. Mad said, which drew cheers from most of the class. I kept silent since I knew the cost, but I still paid attention to the only other student to not cheer. She was dressed in the school's uniform, but underneath the uniform she was covered in long gauze bandages that shone white underneath the sunlight. None of her skin was exposed at all. Even her eyes weren't visible, but still, she was a good student, silent most of the time, and similar to Mr. Mad and most of the other students, she goes by Sobriquet rather than her given name. She went by the Killer of Kemet, often shortened to just KK. It certainly fit her well. She looked like a mummy with all of her gauze, and there has been a persistent rumor that she killed someone to get into Agamemnon. A rumor she verified to anyone who asked her. However, as cool as her sobriquet is, mine didn't work out the same way. It sounded cool and full of reference when I told the headmaster I wanted my sobriquet to be the High Priest. It felt clever at the time, a reference to what my name was based off of. Why, High Priest of Shiloh and the penultimate judge before the time of kings. It was also another term for the Arcana Hierophant, a reference to the cards given to me by my mother before I came to Agamemnon's Academy for accelerated apprenticeship. I still don't know why the cards were important, but I knew that they were important. I felt confident going by that sobriquet, the High Priest, until my home teacher called it out and the class burst out laughing. Yeah, calling yourself the High anything around a bunch of teenagers is a great way to get them to laugh at you. So I decided it was best to keep to myself as much as possible, but with the knowledge that I now needed a partner before we were to go in, I immediately knew who I wanted to be partnered with. KK intimidated most of the other classmates ever since Troll Lord tried to start a fight with her. She finished the fight, and no one has tried to start anything with her anymore, but I have never had any trouble with her. She was quiet, and even though I couldn't see her expression under her bandages, she seemed to be thinking about finding a partner too. Hello, would you like to be partners for this project? I asked her. She turned to face me. I could only see darkness where her eyes were supposed to be, but that made it easier for me to look at her. Then, if I could see her eyes. Sure, she said, turning back to her notebook as she kept writing. Awesome. Now I wonder what duty we are going to be on, I asked as that drew a few more snickers from the others. I ignored them just as I became aware of a presence directly behind me. Just as Mr. Mad spoke while he gripped my shoulder. Good question, High Priest. Killer of Kemet. You are both assigned to Larry Lorai. He is assigned to floors 15 through 18. You both will have to help him get them to a livable condition before the end of the summer. Good luck, Mr. Mad said, before letting go of my shoulder. It took us a few minutes to find Larry. He was a man who was in his 40s, his face already lined from years of frowning. He saw us both and spat on the sidewalk as we approached. I could already tell that we weren't going to get along very well. Put on that PPE over there. PPE is important, so you don't get stuck with something or sick with something else, he said, pointing at some rubber yellow coveralls and boots. Hazmat suits came in varying qualities depending on what needed to be cleaned up. Even something as simple as an accident had to be cleaned up by hazardous materials to deal with blood and the other less pleasant body fluids. Other teams deal exclusively with cleaning up radiation, chemicals, pollution, biohazards, fire damage, or a mixture of all of them. A lot of people see them as janitors, and in a way, it is correct. In the way that it's very essential to modern society, it's often looked down on and overlooked, and the cleaning had to be done. Some facilities had dedicated hazmat teams on hand to deal with disasters, but in the seven cities, they were usually third party companies that were hired for a job before they had to find a different job, also like janitors. The suits appeared to be a level D. They weren't like the ones in the movies that covered the entire body with its own air supply. Ours were simpler. Large coveralls that we had to step into and zip up, which, thankfully, fit well, made out of a thick fabric that would protect us from most substances that might splash on us, and it was made to be cleaned up afterwards. The boots were worn, but still thick rubber with a steel toe, designed to insulate from accidental shock, syringes, and from any heavy objects dropping on our toes. The gloves were also thick rubber with tracking on the fingers and palms. Our safety glasses were slightly scratched, but still ones I could see through. Our masks, on the other hand, were the paper ones used by painters. It offered some protection, but it wouldn't protect from the smell very well. Thankfully, I had a bit of mint flavored chapstick with me that I put on my lips to help cover up the smell and keep my lips hydrated. I offered some to KK, who refused it. When we were ready, Larry grunted and led us over to large tool bags. Power's been cut from the building. We are working on floors 15 and 18. Guess how we are going to get everything we need up there? Larry asked, handing both of us a heavy tool bag and a lamp helmet. We have to walk? I offered. Larry only looked at me like I was an idiot. What are you, an idiot? We don't walk. We climb up the stairs, he said, leading us into the building. KK was quiet and stoic, but the way her back tightened up, I could guess that she wasn't looking forward to climbing up those stairs either. Our lamps revealed that the stairs were covered in graffiti and trash and something that smelled a lot like dirt. Ancient papers and food wrappers decorated our feet as we walked up the steps. I did my best to not complain, remembering what my father often said about people my age only complaining and never having to work for anything. Still, though, I couldn't help but notice that Larry wasn't carrying any tool bags while we climbed those stairs. As we climbed, Larry spoke about his plan for cleaning Temperance Tower. Now, most people will start on the lower floor, but that's a bad idea. It just means you have to carry any heavy items up with you. You might ruin the work you did before. If you start at the highest floor, you just have to bring it down with you, not up. Now, if we can get the upper floors in decent shape, then we can set up a suspended platform and help get heavy things up and down the building. That way, we don't have to carry every heavy piece of equipment up and down the stairs. If we were going to set up a suspended platform for heavy equipment, why don't we set it up first before having us carry 30 kilograms up 72 flights of stairs? KK asked Larry, who only scoffed in response. Dumbass and lazy. I knew it. You kids don't appreciate hard work. It's because it takes time to set up the suspended platform, and it takes time to bring the tools to the right levels. We can get a lot of cleaning done and ready by the time the suspended platform's ready. Now, I don't know how it works in your world, but in the real world, when you are given a contract, if you finish it early, you get a bonus for it. So, every hour of work we save means a bigger paycheck for you and your team. KK responded by gesturing rudely at Larry, who didn't even turn around. Now look, I don't do things half-assed. It gets done all the way, or you might as well not do anything. I will have expectations. If you don't meet them, you don't get lunch or a break. Do you understand? He said as we passed the 10th floor while KK and I followed behind while I was puffing from the exertion. Um, doesn't that violate working laws? We are guaranteed breaks and lunch when we work 2 hours and lunch when we work 4 hours. That way we get appropriate rest from work, I said, and Larry responded by lowering his mask and spitting down the stairwell, letting it drop to the ground floor. Yeah, that's for paid employees, dumbass. You're not paid, you don't get breaks, unless I say so. So, listen here, smartass. If you got a problem with it, go whine to Daddy. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to spend the rest of his life fighting your fights for you. All you have to do is work hard. Not that much to ask, is it? Larry said, and my jaw clenched as I heard both my father and my mother's voice in my head. If you did some actual work, then maybe you would have actual character. Maybe you wouldn't be so pathetic. If you don't like something, then change it. Do something. All you do is study, homework, chores, school, and read. You need to do something. My father's voice echoed after he came home from a week-long work trip and he saw me reading a book. Be the better person. That's how you show strength, my mother's voice said, as she helped get ice for my red cheek after my father's tirade. At this moment, following behind someone who was making me carry his bags, and he had the gall to still complain about something I haven't done yet and calling me lazy, it was hard to choose. But Moments like this are what defined me more than the moments where it was easy to do the right thing. I'm going to be the better person, I said out loud. Larry grunted in a way that suggested he thought I was agreeing with him. I wasn't going to correct him. I was already exhausted from carrying the heavy bag, and this was when I noticed a difference between KK and me. Every flight, I put the bag down for a moment to let myself catch a breath. But even with all of Larry's machismo, he was also panting, even if he was trying to hide it. But KK wasn't even breathing heavily, and as far as I could see, she never sat her bag down once. She didn't even seem tired. Was she an exime? It would make sense, but if that was the case, I should definitely have a private conversation with her later. Larry didn't notice as he continued the trek up the last few flights to the top floor of Temperance Tower. He opened the door and sat a rubber doorstop to keep it open, and across from the stairway door was the elevator door. Like most of the stairway, it was graffitied, but this one felt both intentional and done with artistry. It was painted like a golden castle tower, almost resembling a rook from chess, with a silver crown on top. The middle of the tower had the alchemical symbol of iron on it, also associated with Mars or just men in general, and on the bottom of the painted tower was the Roman numeral 16, XVI. My breath caught in my throat as I thought about the cards given to me by my mother. I had the Empress and the Hermit, but does this mean the tower was somewhere on this floor? My sore muscles stopped aching at the thought as Larry leaned back and popped his back loud enough for us to hear it. Now, let's start over by the far office. Brush all the junk into one pile and then we'll start bagging it, he said as he stepped away towards the balcony. He clearly needed a smoke break after climbing up all those steps and making two children carry his things for him. Still, though, my excitement overrode my reluctance. I removed the pole pieces and started screwing them together, including the broom head, so that way I could sweep up the papers and needles. But I would be paying attention to a very specific piece of litter that would stick out like a sheet of gold amongst a pile of shredded paper. You're awfully excited to be cleaning, KK commented, while she also put her broom together, with a lot less excitement than I did. I'll explain to you when we're alone, I said. My heart was pounding in excitement from the idea of finding another clue to the strangeness that tied me to my mother. But can you keep a secret? We were pushing the papers into corners to be put into large trash bags at a later time. While it was piled up, I began to explain to KK why I was so happy to see the elevator. I don't have a lot of details, but I found out there are some esoteric constructs created by a coven of powerful witches in Astoria. They're not alive in a traditional sense, but they feel and grow and have desires, but they don't die. You can destroy them for a while, but they only form again elsewhere in a new form with no memories of their previous lives. So, essentially unstoppable to death, all they can be is contained. The Coven called them the Arcana, and confined them to various places throughout all that is. They are marked with cards telling you what they are. My mother gave me two of the Arcana's cards, but the Arcana themselves are free and out in the world. However, I still have the cards with me, and I don't know how, but I can call forth their power from the cards. She even gave me a notebook explaining a bit about what they are and what they do. I pulled out my phone to show pictures I took of the notebook, specifically the part that told about the tower. The tower was kept within, well, a tower, representing disruptive change or dangerous revelations. The tower has the ability to create and open paths anywhere in Altus. Despite the tower's ability to create paths, it cannot actually leave the tower it is trapped in. But the tower could be brought to other places by the power of someone else. So, if I can help the tower escape, maybe I'll gain its ability to open paths to other places. Do you know how useful that would be? I finished telling KK, who finally turned up from scrapping garbage to look my way. Paths anywhere, even say in the Emperor's personal chambers? KK asked excitedly, and I shrugged. I mean, I assume so. Don't know why you would want to do that though. You'd be aerated and rotting long before you found anything interesting, I said without exaggeration. No one truly knew where the Emperor lived. It was known he lived somewhere in the Imperial Palace, but that was about as precise as saying your car was somewhere in the city. The Imperial Palace was over 8 square kilometers and one of the largest palaces in the world. Only a few palaces in the Middle Kingdom that exceeded its footprint, but definitely not in total area. There were bunkers and tunnels under the Imperial Palace that led all over Imperial City. Not merely the urban part of the city, nor the suburbs, but the entire territory of Imperial City. The full scale was obviously hidden from public view, but Mousers had discovered bunkers with the functionalities of mansions buried as far away as Shokanahage Mountains, hundreds of kilometers away from the Imperial Palace, and marked with the Imperial Seal. And the Emperor could be living in any of them, or he may not even be living in Imperial City. The Seven Cities didn't exactly have a good history with the safety of the emperors, and being related to the emperor only made you more likely to harm him, not less. But being related to the emperor also made you a target for enemies outside of the family. So it's not unreasonable for the emperor to have secrets within secrets, and bunkers within bunkers, to keep both himself and his family safe from threats both within and without. So, opening a path that led to a personal chamber that no one on Earth knew where it was and could possibly not exist at all, the best answer I can give is, I think so. But we will have to find the tower first. The graffiti on the elevator suggests it's there. When I saw the hermit, it had the carving of the card on the entrance of the cave the hermit was trapped in. If I was to guess, that must mean the elevator door is the entrance to where the Arcana is kept. Sorry, I guess if I do it. I don't even know if you want to help, I said to KK, who only lifted a hand in response. I'll help you. Honestly, you're a good person, and I think I would have helped you even if there was nothing in it for me. But if this construct can get me to the Emperor's chambers, I would rip this entire tower apart nail by nail if I have to. So, do you really think it's behind the elevator door? She asked me, and I nodded. Once I did, she sat the bush broom down. Come on then, she said as I awkwardly followed behind her. Larry was still outside, and still smoking, probably going to keep smoking for a while, when we made our way back to the elevator. KK stood in front of it strong as she spoke to me. Don't tell anyone about what you're going to see, she said as she placed her hands on the elevator doors. At first, I didn't know what she was talking about, until I saw some of her bandages unwrap from her fingers and slither like snakes as they slid from her fingers and wiggled between the elevator doors. After a moment, KK pushed her arms apart, and I could hear the scrap of metal on metal as the elevator's doors opened, as the Killer of Kemet pushed her arms apart. After a moment, the doors were open, and beyond the elevator doors was only the darkness of the elevator shaft. Of course, I should have thought of that. If the power was off, the elevator would have descended to the lowest level. I explained that to KK, expecting her to be angry, or at least upset. She just nodded and said, "That makes sense," and pulled her arms together, dragging the doors back into position with more noise. Once back in place, her bandages withdrew from the crevice between the doors, and they slid back onto her arms, and she caught me staring at the bandages. "How strong are you?" I asked her as she readjusted her PPE. "Strong enough. Not as strong as I will be," KK answered before pointing back at the room we were working on. "We should get back to the room. I don't know about you, but I want lunch today," KK said, walking back to the office. We spent a few hours pushing the trash into piles and then piling the desks and chairs to another wall. I spent the time deep in thought, trying to figure out how we were supposed to get down to the basement. The basement was off limits to us and the cleaning company. No power in the building meant I couldn't pull it up. Then there was also the fact that the tower had to be somewhere on this floor. But there was nothing as far as I could see. Tons of trash, some shredded files, and papers that were older than my father. Still, even as we pushed and moved items around, Larry never came back to check on us. After a while, we checked for him on the balcony, but he wasn't there. Naturally a bit concerned, I texted Mr. Mad to let him know that Larry, the man in charge of watching us, had vanished. Mr. Mad texted back that Larry was down on the ground floor, having lunch with everyone else. When I asked why we weren't included in the lunch, Mr. Mad just texted, "Well, you weren't here, so we figured you were busy. Don't bother coming down, BTW. Larry grabbed your food to bring it up to you." I swore to myself and gave KK the news. "Well, the good news, Larry isn't missing. Bad news is he went to lunch without us. But hopeful news, he's supposed to be bringing food back up to us?" KK turned to face me and audibly sighed. "Do you honestly think he's bringing us food?" she asked me. "Well, probably not, but what kind of man would go get lunch for himself and then refuse to get food for students he's supposed to watch over?" I said rhetorically, while KK just stared at me and my stomach grumbled. "Fine, he's probably already eaten it," I said as I kept slowly pushing the trash in the hallway into piles. Nearly an hour later, with my hands shaking from hunger, Larry finally came up the stairs. No food in hand, he saw us both staring at him, and he spoke. "What?" "Did you bring us food like Mr. Mad said you were?" I asked him. Larry only shook his head. "If you wanted food, you should have come downstairs and had lunch with everyone else," he said with no guilt in his voice at all. "We weren't told there was food downstairs. We didn't even know when break was. How do you expect us to just know it?" I said, my shaking hands balled into fists from hunger. "Well, in the real world, your boss isn't going to tell you when your break is, when to take lunch. You have to figure out the best time for yourself without interfering with work. Get used to the real world, kid. You're lucky your real boss would have fired you for being a smartass by now," he said, removing a water bottle from his vest as he drank the whole thing in front of me. Where are we supposed to go to the bathroom? I asked him, and he pointed down the stairs. Ground floor. You got 5 minutes to go and come back, he said, and I stared at him. Is that a joke? I cannot walk down those steps in 5 minutes. Tick tock, you got 4 minutes now, Larry said, and in desperation I hurried down the stairwell. The last thing I saw as I made my way to the stairs was KK looking directly at Larry. It took me 8 minutes to make it down to the ground floor, where I found the portable toilets. I also found several coolers full of water bottles, tea, soda, and even bags of chips for snacks. I immediately ate a bag of spicy chips and a bottle of raspberry tea. I grabbed 2 extra bags of chips and 2 bottles of tea before I made my way back up the long stairs. No elevated rise was built yet. Apparently, they were still waiting on parts to be delivered. So, most people over the third floor didn't bother working, or they were helping out on the lower floors. So, the only ones who were asked to climb up the entire tower, because of the lack of an elevated lift, were KK and I. I sighed, putting the tea and chips in my coveralls as I climbed up the stairs. Finally on the top again, and with heavy breath, I saw the trash was all piled to the sides and in bags, with KK pushing the last bits of paper into one final bag. I got you some tea and chips, I said, offering her one of each, which she took eagerly, only to put it away in her coveralls. I'll eat them later, she said as I looked over the progress made. It still needed to be mopped, and the desks and heavy equipment moved downstairs, but it was certainly days' worth of work, all done by her, and her alone. Which reminded me, where is Larry? I asked, and she pointed down below. He went downstairs, said something about how he needed some propping up, so I am guessing he forgot a stash downstairs, KK said, wobbling just a bit when she spoke. Of course he did, but are you going to be okay? We should get you outside, I said, grabbing her hand and leading her outside. She followed, and we stood outside, breathing clean air and looking down over the buildings. It was a mosaic under the setting sun as the light above lightened and the lights below brightened. Far off in the distance, we could see the cathedral, sat in the middle of Cathedral City. The cathedral acted as both a central area of worship and central government for the territory. The Pontifex administered services of a religious nature, leading the many priests and religious figures in the 7 cities. He didn't serve any single religion. He was considered the highest religious authority for all religions in the 7 cities. Second in power only to the emperor himself. He created broad rules for all places of worship and making sure at least one person representing himself was in every religious institution. Needless to say, it wasn't popular with the Abrahamic faiths, nor the old faiths. The 7 cities had more religions than people, it seemed, and all of them had to be monitored by the Pontifex in some way. From what I understood, this Pontifex was mostly concerned with collecting tithes and keeping cults from growing dangerous, instead of monitoring what was taught. Still, though, the thought made me uneasy. Why would one man have final say before any god? He wasn't supposed to have an interest in outlawing any worship, but any worship that didn't see him as the final authority was, by definition, outlawed. It seemed a lot like him keeping an interest in outlawing faiths that didn't follow him as the final authority. Still, though, it wasn't quite as odd as the true cathedrals that only followed the pontifex. From what I knew, most cathedrals outside of the seven cities followed Yeshua as the final authority on life and death. Some of them had their own version of a pontifex that lived in exile somewhere in Europa. But overall, they followed Yeshua. That wasn't the case within the true cathedrals in the seven cities. There, it was taught that the emperor was the hand of Io, the god that all other gods obeyed, and the pontifex was Io's voice. So, in their eyes, every other religion was either meant to serve Io, were secretly demons acting as false gods to draw people away from Io, or both. Their very belief system built into the seven cities government, and the freedom of religion went as far as under Io. Nothing could be above nor equal to Io. Even the idea of there not being an Io is forbidden to be proposed. And with every church, temple, shrine, and prayer circle in the seven cities monitored by the pontifex, it was definitely off-putting. Still, though, I did enjoy the beauty of the city. Around the central cathedral, several other domes and arches were built that accentuated the sun as it set. The skyscrapers around it had stained plate glass that let pretty colors flow through. Most of the buildings were owned by the Pontifex. Even Temperance Tower, that we were standing in, was owned by him once, before being sold to my father's company. Still, though, there was a lot of light in this dark city, as I watched the sky turn dark and the ground turn light. What about you? I don't know anything about you, KK. I told you all about my life goals, but I don't know anything about you. I asked, and she looked over the city, also looking away from me. I'm not that interesting. I'm used to not having people ask about me. I don't know where to start, so I won't, KK said. We waited in silence for a minute while I sipped my tea. Well, you are pretty interesting. I just saw you pry open an elevator without any tools with prehensile bandages. I think you're very interesting, I told her. I wasn't sure, but it almost looked like she was smiling under her bandages. Thank you, High Priest, she said, still staring off, now opening her bag of chips, carefully placing them one piece at a time inside of her mouth. I couldn't hear any chewing. I wasn't always like this. Before my accident, my parents and my uncle called me the prettiest girl in the seven cities. That was what I had to offer. I was pretty. I was an average student. I wasn't allowed to be an athlete except for exercise for modeling. I thought I was happy with it, but after it was taken away, I realized I was just trying to please everyone around me. When they were pleased, I thought it was the same thing as me being happy. I know that feeling well, I said, looking over at her, and she looked back at me, the dark void where her eyes should be focused on me. You do, don't you? She said, surprised. Her posture relaxed a little after that statement, and she continued her story. But there was a car accident. It killed my parents and coated me in flammable oil. Even though my life was saved by Vanguard, I was scarred and scared. My uncle ordered the doctors to do whatever it took to fix my face and body, so I could keep being his good little doll. Looking good is the same thing as being good, to him at least. But the things I was subjected to, it was worse than the car crash, and so much worse than the burning. It was like having every nerve in my body pulled out and replaced with electric barbed wire. Every bone was replaced with molten lead that would never cool. My blood was replaced with acid that made sure to scour away anything that the fire didn't burn away. By the end of it all, the only thing left of me was my bandages. KK looked down at her hands, and it sounded like she was crying under her bandages. But I could see no tears fall from her eyes. I I don't know what I am anymore. I am strong, I know that much. I control the bandages with ease, but I don't get tired, thirsty, nor hungry. I can still eat and sleep and taste, but it doesn't offer any sustenance for me. I don't feel pain, but I don't feel much of anything anymore. There's no real nerves left in me. I joined Agamemnon's because I wanted to get back at my uncle. Your uncle, the Emperor? I asked, and even though I couldn't see her expression, it was clear she was shocked that I put it together. You mentioned needing to get into the Emperor's personal chambers, and with how you speak of your uncle, it's clear you hate him. You want him dead, and I don't blame you, and I won't stop you, I told KK, who only hugged me in response. I hugged her back, a bit confused by how she felt. It was a lot like hugging a teddy bear, soft and fluffy with the gauze, but nothing solid underneath. So, I was wrong. KK wasn't an exemy. She was an enigma, and my only friend. After the hug was over, I had to ask, KK, where's Larry? Really? I ate him. I didn't like how he was treating either of us, so when we were alone, I opened my bandages and consumed his entire body. What he knows, I now know too. So I know that his crewmates won't think much of it. He's been on benders that lasted weeks before, and no one liked him. On the entire team, no one even had professional respect for him. By the time they realize he's missing, they'll think he just no-called, no-showed. This cleaning company isn't exactly the most honest. They don't even have an alcohol nor drug policy, so most of the workers douse up during work. Most workers disappear without a trace at some point or another at this job. But yeah, he was an even bigger jackhat than you realized. KK chuckled while looking over the city. He wasn't intending on doing any work at all. But now it's time for us to get back to the others and back to the hotel, KK said, leading the way to the stairs. Shouldn't we bring the tools? Do you want to carry them in the morning? Yeah, no, I said, following my friend down the stairs. By the time we got downstairs, most everyone was talking and joking around. The clear difference between those that were cleaning and those that were just goofing off were clear. because the quiet ones were also the ones who did their work when asked. KK and I sat quietly next to each other on the bus while we were brought to the hotel. A two-star hotel. It had beds, bathroom, and a television. Wi-Fi was offered, but not provided most of the time. And naturally, my cheap father decided it was better for everyone to pair up for the hotel rooms. We were each given a meal kit and sent to our rooms. And my roommate? KK. Agamemnons didn't separate students by sex nor gender. Clearly, they didn't care here either. While I was certain at least a few of my classmates were going to be making bad decisions tonight, some likely permanent, KK and I didn't have such plans. After such a long day, we just wanted to shower and sleep. KK went first while I scrolled through Share My Day, looking at posts from an influencer in River City. Her thing was she was a fairy living in a world made for people much bigger than herself, but her punk aesthetic and blunt humor appealed to me. So, work said I was out of sick days. So, next time they wanted me to work on Monday Rush, I told them I had to attend a funeral. When my boss asked me whose it was, I told him it was going to be his funeral if I didn't get Monday off. I got the whole week off for that one. I was let go about 2 weeks later. They said that I kept wishing customers to have a day as nice as they were, so they saw through it. So, I told my former employers, I hope they get workers exactly as nice as they were. I chuckled at Fallen Grace's jokes when I heard the door open. I turned my eyes to KK. She was dressed in her pajamas, and she was still all in her bandages. But her bandages were now cleaner than they were earlier. At first, I was going to ask, but then I decided asking how hygiene worked with her was a great way to get slapped. So I quickly made my way into the bathroom and realized that the bathroom was dry. No leftover water in the shower, no water droplets in the sink, water on the floor. The towels were still folded and untouched, and the toilet was still sealed with blue tape. I have no idea what KK did in here, but it wasn't normal, that was for sure. Still, though, I put on some music while I showered and then brushed my teeth. Finished, I left the bathroom with my pajamas on and saw KK on her bed watching a news report about an outbreak of something on an Albion cruise ship. Her eyes stared blankly at the screen, and after trying to get her attention a few times, I realized she fell asleep watching the news. So I pulled up her blanket, turned off the lights and television, and went to bed myself, in the other bed in the room. My wireless headphones were in that allowed me to listen to my own stories while I gradually drifted off to sleep. In my dreams, I dreamt of a man in a red and gold uniform working as an elevator operator. Unlike other elevator operators, his feet were chained to the floor and his arm was chained to the handle that controlled where the elevator went. People came into his elevator asking to be taken elsewhere, and he would take them there. Even places that couldn't possibly exist in a building, like the beach, the OSS, the Emperor's quarters, and even to a certain point in the past. But despite all the places this operator traveled, he still wasn't allowed to leave, and he wasn't getting anything for all of his services, not even a thank you. His form was growing more and more haggard, tired, and hungry as he went from place to place. But then, when he got to the point where I thought he was going to pass out, an odd boy entered the elevator. A boy with a long, flowing black dress that looked like it belonged to a quinceañera. He had golden eyes and a face that looked so familiar, but I couldn't place. He saw the elevator operator, and instead of demanding to go somewhere, he asked the operator, "Where do you want to go?" The golden-eyed child asked the elevator operator, who only sighed. "Home," he said in a soft and defeated voice. The boy giggled. "And what would you give for that?" the boy asked in a mischievous voice. "Anything," the tired man said. The boy nodded and extended a hand to shake his. "I can do that for you. Some day a boy will break you out of these chains. On that day you will offer him anything, after you are freed. Promise me that, and I promise you that you will go home again." The man eyed the boy suspiciously. "How will I know that he is the boy that will let me out?" the man asked, and the boy waved it away. "That's the easy part. He will have my face, but he will not have my eyes," said the boy, who turned to face me. Now I recognized the face as my own, and those golden eyes dug deep into me as the golden-eyed child's echoed in my mind as I woke up. Free him, free him, free him, free him, free him. I woke up to see that KK was dressed for the day and about to shake me awake. But seeing my panicked face, she tilted her head and a concerned voice spoke. "Did I scare you?" I shook my head and took her hand, and that was offered to me, and got pulled up. Despite her apparent lack of mass under her bandages, she was powerful, and I could feel the strength in her grip. She felt like she could crush steel with her grip. Still, though, as I was pulled up, I shook off the sleep and decided it must have been just a dream. An odd one, for sure, since I don't dream of myself, and I definitely don't dream of golden eyes. Something behind those eyes was like a snake or a dragon that was staring at me. "I think I just had a bad dream. Let me get dressed and we can meet the others for breakfast," I said with a weak smile, and KK looked at me before she nodded and turned to the TV, this time watching news about advances across the Great Plains against the Kingdom of Vespucci. I enjoyed history a lot, but I hated current events. I don't get how KK could watch it without getting depressed. I grabbed my clothes and went into the bathroom to change. I had a week's worth of clothes, but we were expected to wash our clothes in a nearby washateria. A week's worth of clothes sounds like a decent amount, but have you ever tried wearing only the same 7 clothing sets for 2 months? Still, though, in the bathroom, I finally had the chance to do what I couldn't do last night. From my toiletry bag, I removed a lotion that smelled strongly lavender and began to gently massage it onto my face. Father at home had a strict budget that he monitored closely, and he would never let me buy lotion for myself. So I learned how to make it myself, with Mother's help, using the lavender in the garden. At Agamemnon's, they didn't send a receipt of what was purchased, thank the gods, but we did have a limited budget each month for personal items, and it just felt better just to make my own. It reminded me of simpler times. After my lotion was massaged into my skin, I washed my hands and began to brush my hair. My hair wasn't long enough to require brushing, but it was something that brought joy to me. After a few moments, my hair looked a lot fluffier, and now I finally got my clothes on for the day. I looked at myself in the mirror, and even so, I couldn't help but not like what I saw. My clothes looked so boring. Blue denim pants and a red polo shirt. Something meant to be worn under the coveralls, but I was going to match about 20% of the boys down there. Another secret from my father and another truth shared with my mother. At home, hidden deep within my closet, was a few dresses from Mia Vita in Old Town, a place that didn't discourage men from getting dresses and where the owner was able to be discreet and help make a receipt my father wouldn't question. Still, though, I didn't know how my father would react if he ever found out that I owned dresses. He once banned me from wearing a bracelet because he said only girls wore bracelets and it was sending the wrong message to everyone. Even though it was impractical to have dresses of any kind while cleaning Temperance Tower, it still made me sad I couldn't even wear it for myself the entire summer. An entire summer wearing clothes I wasn't comfortable in, and even though it probably wasn't even on purpose, felt like my father was punishing me. But father was really good at that, punishing me without even knowing that he was punishing me. He just saw how it affected himself, and he didn't have the self awareness to be aware of how it affected me. Like when he fired the cook because he wasn't home to enjoy her services. He completely forgot I was still home and that I needed feeding too. When I brought it up to him, he just told me to fend for myself for a few days. The food didn't last a few days, let alone the few months he forgot that I was still living at home, and he remembered to order food to be sent home just before he was supposed to come home. If it wasn't for my mother, I don't think I would have made it. If I really thought about it, it was almost like he didn't care what happened to me, as long as I didn't affect him. But that couldn't possibly be true, though. He did set up for me to go to Agamemnon's, and he set it up so I wouldn't be alone during the summer. Sure, maybe it was to get me out of his hair, but he still gave me a place to live, and I haven't starved to death. For a lot of kids, they would give up anything to have those two things. So I guess I cannot complain. I looked at myself one last time in the mirror and drew the two Arcana cards from my pocket, the Empress and the Hermit. The Hermit was unrecognizable under his hooded cloak, and the Empress's face reminded me of my mother. Same smile and hair. Still, though, I had nothing I could use them for, so I put them back in my pocket and went out to where KK was. Well, I guess it's time to meet the others, I told her with my best smile, and we went downstairs. There was an attached cafeteria to the hotel. There were boxes of donuts, a few gallons of orange juice that were already drunk by the time we got downstairs, and water. I grabbed myself a chocolate donut and sat myself alone, and I started to eat when I realized KK was sitting across from me.
This was an odd surprise because no one liked sitting with the high priest. Despite my sobriquet, everyone at school knew who my father was and feared bullying me directly. I also wasn't the most social person. I was someone who wanted to do my work and go back to my room by myself. Even though KK and I were working together to find the tower, I didn't expect her to do this. It was almost like she was being nice to me. That was unsettling to me because, in my experience, people were only nice if they wanted something from me. And since I didn't know what KK wanted, that left me at a disadvantage. But still, I had to play the game to get ahead. So, are you enjoying your donut? I asked her. She got a vanilla coated eclair. Most were chocolate and a few were caramel, but I guess vanilla coated also made sense. Just, it was hard to get enough to make a coating. KK nodded and lifted her eclair to her void of a mouth and swallowed it whole. I don't draw sustenance from food, but I still taste it. But I don't taste it like you do. It's like I can taste its color, texture, and individual ingredients all at the same time. It's a story of how it grew from seeds in soil, strengthened by the sun, and all mixed together, forced to react to each other, before being exposed to heat and then fried to make it this way. Every step has a taste, and every bit I savor. So even without sustenance, it makes every bite quite worth it, KK said, looking past me, and I only nodded. So, what do you think we're going to do today? I asked her, just as Mr. Mad entered the cafeteria. Just like the day before, he was as green as ever, his face still covered with a mask. I don't know when he eats, but I am certain he has to eat, but he just eats separate from his class. Okay, Economica, I am afraid that there has been an unexpected illness with one of the cleaning crew, so a few students will have to be shuffled around. The Killer of Kemet and the High Priest, Mr. Mad said, just as the entire class got out a round of laughter at my sobriquet. I wanted to hide under the table, but I knew trying to hide would just make me look even sillier. You are going to report to Tanya, and you'll be helping her and Troll Lord get into the 13th floor so it can be cleaned, he announced before talking about the other students' new locations. But I felt myself go pale, being assigned to be on the same team as Troll Lord. I glanced his way, and he had an entire box of donuts that he was eating as he alternated between eating and drinking directly from a jug of orange juice. He towered over 7 feet tall, despite only being 10 years old, like myself, and he was built like a heavy weightlifter. He excelled in physical education, even among the XME, who were usually the same ones that were lifting cars and punching through steel. But you'd think with Trollord's indiscreet nature and immense strength, he wouldn't be much of a thinker. Except his mind excelled at STEAM challenges. Science, technology, engineering, economics, mathematics. He was the top scorer in all of them, but his true passion was computer science. He planned on becoming a white hat hacker for the Mad Scientists Union when he graduated. But for now, he was just the biggest kid in class who believed that his intelligence put him above us and that he had the strength to hurt just about anyone. The only person I saw who could put him down was KK. I turned my eyes to her, and she was as relaxed as ever. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. If she was calm, she must know that it was going to be all right. Still, though, I wasn't looking forward to dealing with him. He ignored me all year, but I don't think I would be able to stand his personality. When we made it to Temperance Tower, the cleaning crew was asked to focus on the lower floors while the lift was being built. Still, though, I was glad to not have to climb up all those stairs. Tanya was a much quieter woman than Larry was. Her hair was graying, but she was a lot more patient while we put on our coveralls. I don't know how they found one that fit Troll Lord, but they did. And when he put it on, he flexed for us. This was the only one they had in my size, and even then, it's still tight. They'll have to special order one in my size, he boasted to us while we nodded. Our toolboxes this time had a lot more cutting tools, and when we climbed the steps, Troll Lord insisted on carrying everything himself. I couldn't help but notice that he kept glancing at the Killer of Kemet. My gods, was he trying to flirt with her? He was in for a rude awakening if he kept it up. KK didn't seem to notice. She was clearly looking for something else. If I was to guess, she was looking for any sign of the tower within Temperance Tower. While we made our way up to the 13th floor, Tanya told us about it. Some of the older buildings block off the 13th floor because it is considered an unlucky number. The original engineers made it so the elevator didn't open on that floor, and there weren't any doors that even led to the 13th floor. When the building was initially condemned, the squatters decided to make their way into it. So, even though it was blocked off with concrete, they somehow broke through it and started to live on the 13th floor. And that is when the odd part happened, Tanya said, and KK asked, "What happened?" They then blocked off the 13th floor again. Don't ask me how they managed it, but they got steel panels and bolted it to the concrete and then welded it to each other, and then started to brick it over before they started painting and gluing satanic shark shit all over it. I guess they saw something that spooked them and they wanted to keep it inside, she said with a shrug as we made our way to the 13th floor. Even though I passed it a few times yesterday, I didn't take the chance to look it over. But now I had the chance, and I finally saw how odd it truly was. The other floors had large yellow numbers saying what floor they were. This one didn't. It did have a partially completed brick wall jutting out, and behind it, I could see steel panels, and I could also see that it was welded shut. But this was where it was truly odd. The panels weren't crudely welded shut. They were welded literally seamlessly, and I couldn't tell where one panel ended and the other began. I could see small symbols sprayed all over the steel and paint, or scrawled onto the concrete in front of it in yellow chalk. When Tanya said satanic shark shit, I was expecting a pentagram, maybe a cross of St. Peter, or a sulfur cross, if the graffiti artists were feeling spicy. But these were very different symbols. I saw angelic sigils asking for mercy and protection. I saw the seal of Solomon scrawled in chalk on the ground in front of the door. I even saw the mark of Hastur painted onto the steel. They were trying to keep something inside of the 13th floor, and they weren't doing it in a crude or even desperate way, if that makes sense. I mean, they were desperate in the sense that they were trying a lot of things, but not desperate like they were doing it in a dumb way, you know? Up close, I could see with my flashlight that the bricks all had something carved into it. I read a few of the bricks, and when I recognized what they were, my blood cooled. They were prayers. Every brick had a prayer carved into it, all of them to a different god, but all of them saying the same thing. Please keep it inside. Whatever it was, I wasn't confident about it, but I wasn't going to voice my objections. Tanya didn't know what it meant, and she didn't care, and Troll only cracked his knuckles in preparation for breaking down the brick. I slunk over to KK and whispered, I have a bad feeling about this place. They wanted to keep something inside, and someone went to a lot of work to keep it inside. Probably something dangerous, I told her, and she whispered back to me, yeah, probably. Something like, say, an Arcana? If they didn't understand what it was, wouldn't it make sense that they would try to contain it? It would also explain why no one talked about it. Keeping it on a floor no one can access makes sense, right? She said, and I couldn't help but nod. It did make a certain amount of sense. Keep it out of easy access, and if someone doesn't understand it, they are going to want to contain it, especially if it was drawing dangerous things towards them, something the tower had the power to do. Still, though, as I watched Troll Lord standing on the Seal of Solomon, something in me was screaming danger was beyond that door. Tanya offered Troll Lord a sledgehammer, and he shook his head. I don't want to break it, he said as he grabbed the bricks, starting on the top, and he pulled, bringing down large parts of the brick wall with ease. Within a few minutes, we had all of the bricks in a large bucket that we slowly lowered to the ground floor with a long rope pulley. Now down to the steel panel. I wasn't sure what I was expecting Troll Lord to do, but instead he turned to KK. Ladies first, he said, and KK responded with a rude gesture, but she approached the steel panel. Removing her gloves, her bandages unraveled, snaked into the very small crease where the concrete met the steel. After the bandages squeezed between the concrete and steel, I heard a soft crick, which quickly rose to a large crack as I watched the Killer of Kemet pry the steel plate from the concrete, revealing the darkness of the 13th floor behind. The steel plate fell to the floor, and KK bowed at the waist and pointed inside. The door is open. Enter freely and without fear, she said with a smile in her voice. And both Tanya and Troll Lord entered, while I just stood there in shock. And after a moment, KK finally spoke. What? What? Well, I don't want to get on your bad side, I said as I shined my light into the 13th floor while we entered. I could see bare concrete columns in rows across the floor, but there were no walls and, oddly enough, no trash. The air smelled musty, but there wasn't even dust on the floor. I shined my lights inside and I could see a trail into the darkness from the chalk from outside, but otherwise I would have no way to know where Tanya and Troll Lord went. Clearly, this floor wasn't built with the intent of ever being accessible. Where the elevator was on the 18th floor, there was only concrete here. The elevator wouldn't be accessible even if they tried. Above us there were no ceiling tiles, no HVAC, no wires, and no lights. Just empty space before it led to the steel and concrete above. The few windows I could see were pasted over with black wax paper that prevented any light from leaking out, but still I could see a bit of light leaking through the seams. We should try to catch up to them, I said, turning on my headlight and following the chalk trail with KK following with the toolbox. I offered to help, but she waved it off. She didn't get tired and held it with ease, when I got tired just from walking up all those stairs. We kept following the chalk footsteps, and after a few minutes, it felt like we walked farther than the edge of the building, but still the chalk steps continued forward, with no fading. Something isn't right here, I told KK, who agreed. Let's retrace our steps and use our radios to see if we can contact them, or maybe the outside to see where they are, or if we need to organize a search party, she said, and I nodded in agreement as we turned to face where we were coming from, only to see something that we weren't expecting. I expected to see a straight trail of 2 tracks in yellow chalk. What I saw instead was numerous winding paths that covered every inch of the floor behind us, with the door long since gone. The trails led all over, even on the columns and the concrete ceiling. Something was messing with us, and it was doing so without us knowing. Any clue what this is? I asked KK, who shook her head and took off her gloves, letting her hands unravel into long, thin strips, revealing only darkness within her body, where her wrist should be. She was prepared to fight, and I didn't have much of a weapon. In one hand, I grabbed the spare flashlight I carried, which was heavy, I admit, but I doubt it was much of a weapon against whatever did this. And in my other hand, I withdrew the hermit card. I didn't understand all of its abilities, but it had a few that may come in handy. KK and I stood back to back as we glanced through the darkness, now aware of the feeling of being watched. We turned and shone our lights around until we heard a laugh off in the distant darkness, where our flashlights couldn't quite reach. We both faced that darkness together, while the Killer of Kemet's bandages extended like whips, ready to strike at the mysterious foe. The laughter continued for a moment before the foe finally spoke. I am the darkness beyond your sight. What are you? The darkness spoke, with a pair of golden eyes visible in the amorphous darkness just beyond the column of concrete. Something about the way the darkness spoke reminded me of one of the stories I read from the Explorer's Encyclopedia. Something about a vampire that had to be defeated by countering what it called itself. Is that what is going on here? Before I had a chance to respond, KK called out to the darkness. I'm your worst nightmare, she called as her bandages struck out into the darkness like venomous snakes, only for them to disappear into the darkness like it was made of smoke. After a moment, they grew taut, like something was pulling on them. I watched as KK braced herself against the cement, only to be pulled into the darkness. Her feet drug grooves through the cement, and even as she was pulled into the darkness, she didn't scream, but she did say one thing, "High Priest," as she was pulled into the darkness. It stared at me with its golden eyes, and it focused on me. "I am the hungry darkness beyond your vision. I consume friend and foe alike," it said, which only confirmed my suspicion it was playing a similar game to the vampire in the story. If this was the game it was playing, I knew how to respond. I shone my flashlight directly towards the darkness as I spoke. "I am the light, darkness piercing and truth revealing," I said as the darkness retreated, showing the unconscious bodies of Tanya, Trollord, and KK. The darkness slinked around the columns and I followed with my flashlight until my friends were behind me and the darkness was in front of me. A bit closer now, but now I was a lot more confident. I got my colleagues out of it, and I knew that I was going to get this creature. I just had to have a flexible mindset and to stay ahead of it. Creatures of this power rarely flex their power. It had to be a game of cleverness, because ultimately power was as common as fabric was to humans. Having fabric wasn't impressive. What you did with it was what was impressive. "I am the unknown, hidden from light and haunting humanity," the darkness said as it dissipated, the voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I now had a better idea of how this creature played. It was a hider and liked playing traps rather than impressive acts. So, how do you smoke out something that hid from everything? You force it to define itself for you. I lifted my hermit card up high as light shone from it. I was going to make my place very clear. Even though I couldn't see my foe, I could feel it withdraw from the light of the Arcana. It knew what this was, and this definitely wasn't the tower I was looking for. I am the hermit, truth seeker both within myself and with the world around me. All that is hidden is revealed to me, he said with confidence as the creature's form was finally revealed to me. I saw a long flowing black dress and golden eyes before it disappeared behind the column directly next to me. We stood at that impasse for a moment while I waited for it to respond. I could try to grab it, but after seeing what happened to KK, I knew I definitely couldn't overpower it. I had to play and win this game to defeat it. I am the evil in the world. Endless, everywhere, efficacious, enduring, eerie, and everyone, said now, sounding like many voices speaking at the same time. It figured out what I was trying to do, so it was trying to escape by intimidating me. Unfortunately for it, I already had an answer for this one. I am all the heroes in the world, eternal, ever-present, effective, epic, extravagant, and everyone. I responded in kind. My voice echoed through the empty space, and there was silence from behind the column until it finally stepped out from behind the column, and I nearly dropped to the floor when I saw what it looked like. Whatever this creature was, it knew how to get to me. It could have appeared as any monster in the world, any fearsome foe, but it didn't care about the flash. No, it cared about the fear. The figure that stepped out from behind the column looked like my father. He towered over me and was dressed in that blue suit with the red tie, and his hair brushed just so, but his eyes were all wrong. They were as gold as the sunset and just as terrible. He spoke with my father's voice, and I felt all of my courage and bravery just dissolve away, like a sugar castle on the beach. I wanted to curl up and hide, but still I stood. Hiding would have just made it worse. I had to beat it, but with my father's face and voice, my strength that was with me just a moment ago disappeared without a trace. The creature knew this, and spoke with ease that it did not have even a moment ago. I am vengeance, slayer of humanity, ender of heroes, breaker of empires, the tragedy to every comedy. Who dares to stand before me? He said, getting on his knees and lifting my hands to his neck. When he touched my hands, I could feel myself be filled with so much anger and hatred. I truly hated that face and feared it, and I felt like every bad thing in my life was because of that face. What can I possibly be that would free me from trying to kill this creature that looked like my father? But I knew if I tried to take its life, I would lose. But I was full of so much anger and hatred. I don't know what stopped my hand from strangling it. The warmth and heartbeat was just beneath my fingers. It would be so easy to just squeeze, just a little, and then it would be no more. No more trouble for me anymore. I would have justice, wouldn't I? I remember all of the voices telling me to go ahead with it. My father's voice telling me to just do something. Mr. Mad's voice telling me that a human life isn't worth the trouble that they generate. So if they trouble you, just get rid of them. But still, something held my fingers back. If I could only name it, I would be able to move past this. Was it restraint, maybe? No, that wasn't the right word. Showing restraint and revenge merely meant that I was seeking a different type of revenge, even if it was petty instead of lethal. That would still give this creature victory. I watched it smile with my father's smile, and the golden eyes sparkled. It had me, and it was just waiting for me to either say something that would fail or to give in. I had to figure this out. Maybe it was forgiveness? But immediately after thinking that, I saw the face again and I knew it definitely wasn't forgiveness. I did not forgive what my father did to me or mother. I could put up with it, I would live with it, and I should process it, but I would never need to actually forgive him. Seeing his face below me, with my hands around his neck, only solidified that he wasn't going to be forgiven. Not because I was incapable of forgiveness, but because he was never going to change his behavior long enough to be forgiven. But seeing those golden eyes, I finally had my answer. I am mercy, the end of toxic cycles, the birth of heroes, the death of villains, the breaking of family curses, and the first brick of kingdoms, I said gently, and I withdrew my hands from the neck of my father's doppelganger. One of the hardest things I ever did in my life. It was like treading through a stream of molten lead. My hands by my side now, the creature silently stared at me before it whimpered. Mercy? And it remained silent. After a minute, I had a bit of my courage back, even though I was looking at my father's face. What kills mercy, monster? Or did I find something that you cannot overcome honestly? I told it. And then the creature stood and whispered to me, I will leave Temperance Tower, High Priest. But what you seek isn't on this floor, but on the floor below the lowest floor. No path, no ramp, no stairway, nor ladder leads there. But that's only 4 ways. If you're clever, you'll realize you're on a crossroads. Now, be what you told me you are, the golden-eyed man said, withdrawing, and when I blinked, I was no longer looking at my father, but myself, with a long, flowing black dress and golden eyes. This creature was the same deal-maker I saw speaking to the tower in my dream. And I left you a gift in your hotel room. One you cannot give back, and one I don't think you'll ever pay forward, the golden-eyed child said, disappearing into the darkness. And when I turned back to my colleagues, I saw they were still passed out. But now we were right next to the door. Well, this is going to be an explanation, I said as I ran to the radio and called down to the ground floor. Mr. Mad, we have a medical emergency on the 13th floor. Work on Temperance Tower couldn't be paused due to a medical emergency. The Vanguard got us from the 13th floor. When they got there, only KK and I were the only ones who could walk. Tanya and Trollord were both still knocked out and had to be treated at St. Agatha's Hospital. KK and I were taken down to the ambulance, where they checked us out. I was, naturally, in perfect health. KK just kept insisting to the paramedics that she was fine. She didn't want to be checked out by the paramedics at all, not even to check her heartbeat. She was adamantly against being seen. I am refusing to be seen. I am well enough, as you can see, and I do not want to be evaluated. Bring me an AMA, KK told the paramedic. Paramedic was a woman with blue hair and a prosthetic arm. She held a digital oximeter in her hand, a device used for measuring a few different things, but would have required removing the Killer of Kemet's bandages and clipping it onto her fingers. Something that couldn't happen. Well, without your guardian's permission, we cannot accept your AMA, the paramedic said in confidence, only for KK to scoff in response. That's not actually true. In the 7 cities, children of the age of 10 or higher can sign for their own AMAs without parental knowledge nor consent. The only stipulation is I have to be conscious enough to request the AMA, sign the AMA, and to understand the stipulations. I am well enough for all three, KK said, while the paramedic tried a different route. Well, you've seen what happened to both Troll Lord and Tanya. If it was that bad for them, there could be something bad that isn't easily visible. At least, let us check you out, the paramedic tried while KK crossed her arms. My point exactly. Those two were knocked out and they are still knocked out. When someone is knocked out for even a few seconds, there is a high risk of concussion. Someone knocked out for that long? Forget concussion. You're talking about brain bleeds, brain bruising, permanent brain damage. And that is just the first things I can think of. They should be at the hospital now, and you shouldn't be wasting precious minutes on someone who is clearly not concussed and is refusing help. Give me the AMA to sign and be on your way, KK said, which only produced a sigh from the paramedic, who brought out the AMA and a pen, and KK signed it. An AMA is, in simple terms, a form that says against medical advice that a patient is either refusing care or wanting to leave before the medical professional says it's okay. It gives the patients some autonomy over treatment and the doctor's protection from being sued. Naturally, there were high-profile cases every few weeks from one side of the AMA or the other, arguing whether patients deserve to have more control over it or if the doctor does. Still, with the form signed, the ambulance drove off, and I walked with KK, while Mr. Mad was busy filling out incident forms. That is a lot of medical information you have. Do you just study a lot of medicine, or what? I asked her, and she shook her head. I still have the doctor's knowledge from when I consumed him. A lot of it is useless in day-to-day life, but it comes in handy sometimes. I've already been seen by doctors who deal with eczema and enigmas. I don't have a physical heart, blood, brain, nothing. My bandages still create something approximating human body temperature. The odd part is my bandages, despite looking like gauze, are actually made from a mixture of keratin, muscle fibers, and epithelial cells. They don't need anything to stay alive, but they still move and grow, albeit slowly. She finished as she saw me staring. Sorry, too weird? She asked, and I shook my head before responding. That means your bows are made of flesh, I said, which brought a laugh from her. Part of her bandages on her head were shaped to look like it was covering hair, and some of the bandages were shaped like a bow. Yes, high priest, my bows are made of flesh. I don't want to seem weird, but there's so much about myself I don't understand. And the more I learn, the weirder it gets. After I get my revenge on the Emperor, I am going to try to reverse what happened to me. There has to be science or magic or spell or something that can make me human again. I am understanding my curse and myself more and more. Someday I'll be able to separate myself from what makes me this, she said, gesturing down to her body. What are you going to do after your revenge and you have your body back? What do you mean? I mean, after your uncle moves on and you have a human body back, what does KK want to do? You have a life purpose driven by revenge and becoming human again. The hard question isn't what to do if you don't succeed. The answer to that question is easy. You keep trying, You try another spell, you try another experiment, you try another assassination, or you try to do something new that you haven't tried before. Failures just mean you keep trying. But the harder question is what to do after you succeed. If you achieve your revenge, then you try to get your body back. Okay, a good goal. But then what? Do you keep going to school? What do you study? What do you even want to be when you grow up? Not just professionally, but what kind of person do you want to be? If you succeed in your life's mission with your entire life ahead of you, what's left for you to do? You have no more horizon because you already touched it. You have no more veil because you burned it. Nowhere left to sail because you touched every land you wanted to, I explained to her, only for her to be silent. Well, think about it. Think about what you like doing, what you want to do, and what you are good at. They are not all necessarily going to be the same thing, but if you can find something that applies to all three, it may be something you can do to give your life meaning and purpose. Sorry to put so much on you, but I have a lot of time for introspection, so I think about a lot of things, I said, and KK responded by just hugging me. I never considered what may come afterwards. I will have to think about it. Thank you, she said. I could feel two wet spots where her eyes would be, but when she let go, I couldn't see any tears on her face. Okay, you two, so good news, bad news. The good news is that the cleaning company was liable for the injury, so the school doesn't have to pay for their treatment, Mr. Mad told us, seemingly appearing out of nowhere yet again. I don't think we were concerned about that, Mr. Mad. But what is the bad news? KK said, which caused Mr. Mad to clasp his hands together. Since we are now 3 people down, everyone is going to have to contribute a little harder. And by everyone, I mean you two, he said, pointing at us with both his hands. We didn't do anything wrong, I told him. I was already upset it wasn't our fault, and he simply shrugged. Well, that's not how the real world works, High Priest. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. The problem has to be fixed. We could spend time trying to assign responsibility, or we can get it fixed, he said without a single trace of irony. You are assigning responsibility. You're making us work harder because other people got hurt. That's not fair, I told him, and Mr. Mad sighed and started to mock us. Do you know how often I have to hear that? That's not fair. He stole my homework. It shouldn't count for him. My house burned down. Can't I get an extension? That's not fair. That's not my fault. You're the one who changed homework policy without telling us. That's not fair. That wasn't in the contract we agreed to. That's not fair. What you're asking us to do is illegal. Get over it. Life isn't fair. You're getting a valuable lesson worth more than money. You get to build character. Now, we need the 13th floor cleaned out, and the other blocked off entrance needs to be unblocked before lunch today. Mr. Mad finished, and I checked my phone. Lunch was in 30 minutes. I don't even think we're going to get up there in 30 minutes. Can we please start after lunch? I asked him, only for him to laugh again. Yeah, no. That's not how it works in the real world. What do you think? In a real job, they will delay an important project so you can eat? No. You need to show your employers that you are serious. So, let me make it clear for you. Neither of you are getting lunch until the 13th floor is cleared out. Now, if you can clean it up in a timely manner, you might still have food down here when you get back. But you better be quick, otherwise it might run out. Everyone else has been working hard today," Mr. Mad finished, crossing his arms. When I opened my mouth to speak, he held up a single hand to silence me. "If you say any variation of 'it's not fair,' I will make sure that the two of you will need to clean floors 14 and 12, also before lunch. If this was a real job, no employer would put up with you two arguing with me. Now, you will take lunch when I say you do, and you don't complain. I'd get started if I was you," he said, his face behind his mask unseen, but I was certain he was smiling. I clenched my fists, but I made my way back to the stairs with KK close by. When we were alone, I asked her, "Would you be able to eat him too?" I asked, and she shook her head. "No point. I mean, physically, I could, but it would almost certainly get us in trouble. A vanished worker in a well-known profession in which giving your word is essentially announcing you are lying is one thing. Larry made his life where he was untraceable and where he could pick up and leave without warning. He has done it many times, and despite his old age and lack of a future, he planned to keep doing it. Mr. Matt, on the other hand, is tenured, powerful, and well known for keeping his word. If he disappears without a trace, foul play will be suspected," KK said with a sigh. "If we're going to get back at him, it has to be done in such a way where it doesn't just appear untraceable to us, but we need someone else to take the fall. Mr. Mad isn't someone to let something happen to him and let it go. Even if he had absolutely no proof it was us, he would lash out at us because we convenienced him and he has power over us. Anything we did to strike back at him would only lead to a much larger aftershock. We cannot prevent the aftershock. All we can do is redirect the consequences to someone else. Or we just don't try to get back at Mr. Matt at all. Let him get away with it," I said with a sigh, and KK nodded. We both had bad experiences at Agamemnon's, and each time the headmaster, the ethics committee, and the student safety council always sided with the teacher. Agamemnon's Academy for Accelerated Apprenticeship valued discipline above all else. If that meant students getting denied dinner, students getting failing grades despite perfect scores, students being asked to do extracurricular activities just to stay in school, or students sent to the detention floor, or worse, students being sent to Strophia Stadium, asked to fight the teacher in front of the entire school to show the teachers as the powerful ones, well, as long as it reinforced discipline. So I highly doubt any of them would care about a teacher denying lunch until a task was done. We went up the many stairs again, and I tried to ignore my growling stomach. Every time it growled, I flexed my stomach muscles to keep it from growling. A trick I learned from all the times Father forgot I was at the house before Mother found me. Before we made it to the 13th floor, I made my decision. I'm not going to get back at Mr. Mad at all then. Whatever I could do to get back at him will only make things worse on someone else. So, I'm not going to get my revenge and set up someone else to get the punishment. That is who he is, but that's not who I am, I told KK, who only looked back at me. So, you're just going to forgive him? Trust me, it's not forgiveness. Just because I am putting up with it for now doesn't mean I won't wait for a chance later. And I have a right to be hangry I told KK, who took a bag of chips out of her coveralls. Here, I snuck a few of these while you were talking with Mr. Mad, she said, and I thanked her as I quickly ate up the chips offered to me. When we made it to the 13th floor, it felt a lot less oppressive in the space. It was still dark, but it no longer felt like something was waiting in the darkness. We got to work. I wouldn't say we started quickly, but we got started. I put in headphones and I listened to the latest Mach 5 song while we pulled paper and tape off of the windows, putting the paper into large trash bags. When that was done, we agreed it would be easier to remove the blocked door before sweeping the floors. There wasn't a lot of dust on the floor, but with the chalk and dirt tracked in by us, it was clear that removing the other door block would also make a mess on the floor. The inside of the door block wasn't nearly as interesting as the outside. No marks nor graffiti, just a few scratches on the steel, about a centimeter deep. We both agreed not to think about it since the monster with golden eyes was now gone. KK pried the door block open, and the steel and brick fell to the floor on the other side. Probably should have checked first, KK said, and it brought a chuckle from me. As far as we could tell, everyone else was still down at lunch, even though we spent the last hour cleaning. After the doorway was open, we peered down the stairwell. This side hadn't been set up with a pulley system to drop the trash to the bottom floor. Are we gonna have to drag this to the other side? I asked, and KK shook her head. I'm not dragging it across that floor. That'll make things harder to clean up. I will put them on the ground floor myself, she said as her hands started to unravel. Can you unravel that much? I asked her, and she shrugged. I've never pushed myself that far, but given the mass of a human body, how much gauze I have on my body, and the distance from the 13th floor to the ground floor, I will have to say I am certain that I can do it. Wouldn't be logical if I couldn't, she said as she picked up the steel plate with the bricks piled on top of it, with 3 pieces of gauze as she held it above her head and lowered it slowly, while her other hand gripped the handrail, letting it unravel slowly to avoid damaging the stairs or hurting anyone. Wait, I'm pretty sure your skin has less surface area than the distance between the 13th floor and the ground floor, I told her, and she nodded. You are correct. My skin doesn't have that area. But my body isn't hollow. Not in the way you're thinking of, at least. Where my body was is gauze, making me nearly filled completely with gauze. So, the gauze I am using to unravel to the ground floor is from my internals. Are you okay? I asked, a shiver running up my body. The idea of my internal organs moving and being used to lift a heavy steel plate disturbed me to no end. KK just shook her head. I have no pain, no touch sensation at all. The only thing I feel is proprioception of where the gauze is, she told me before I realized something. Wait, you can feel where your gauze is in respect to where it is to other gauze? That's pretty cool, I told her, and she nodded. Yeah, it comes in handy when shaping my body to look, well, like a body. Otherwise, I would probably be a jumbled up mess, a pile on the floor, or a puddle of gauze. But nonetheless, you'll never guess where my hand is right now. On the ground floor? I asked her, and she nodded, letting go of the steel slab and the bricks piled down there, leaving it on the floor while she withdrew her hand from that floor. Well, that was exhilarating. Now time to sweep the floor, she said, grabbing a push broom while I grabbed mine. But then a question occurred to me. Wait, if you can do all that, couldn't you use your gauze to sweep up the entire floor instead of a broom? I asked her, only for her to chuckle. I know you mean well, but I hope you don't ever realize how messed up that is as a question. Even though I cannot feel it, and I am pretty sure I cannot get sick, the idea of using my internal organs as a broom doesn't appeal to me. It's one thing to use them to extend my reach. It's something else entirely to use them to pick up dirt. So, let's just sweep it up, she said with a flourish as we swept the floor. It took a long time, but while I swept back and forth, my mind thought about how to get below the lowest floor. The golden-eyed child with my face and the beautiful dress told me that I couldn't be reached via path, ramp, ladder, nor stair. Paths were esoteric ways of getting to places. Some people called them portals, doors, mirrors, but paths were the most common way of calling them. A certain action or ritual had to be performed to open them, but it would allow entrance to places it reasonably shouldn't. But if that way was closed, which makes sense since the tower creates an open paths, of course it would also be able to block them. Then I had to find another way. No stairs nor ramp was obviously a reference to the stairwells. When Temperance Tower was built, CDA compliance was the last thing on any of the builders' minds. There were a few ramps that led into the basement, but since that could be reached, the basement wasn't the floor below the lowest floor. So it must be a sub-basement. A sub-basement that isn't on any floor plan at all. That wasn't unheard of, but still unusual. So if I couldn't take a ladder, path, stair, nor ramp, what other way is there to get into the sub-basement? When I saw the bricked over elevator, I had my answer. If I was on a crossroads, like the golden-eyed child said, and 4 different paths were blocked off, then the elevator was a 5th path no one would even consider because the power was off. If the power was off, how was I supposed to use the elevator? I listened to my music, pondering it, when I remembered an obscure bit of building code we talked about in Economica of Crimes class. High-rise buildings, like this, had an uninterrupted power supply specifically for the elevators. It was meant to last up to 90 minutes. It was supposed to allow the elevators to function even in the event of a power outage or an emergency that would require immediate evacuation. The power supply would draw from the local grid, if there was power, and only draw on that when the local grid wasn't available. Now, excited with the possibility of getting to the tower, I remembered everything I could about these power supplies. They were meant to be functional for a period of 3 to 5 years, some lasting even longer, with their longevity being a big selling point. So constant replacements weren't needed. So, if the power was cut off 6 months ago, if the power supply was still connected to the elevator, it would still have power, because not even a year had passed. Then again, it was based on a few assumptions. They could have disconnected the power supply when they cut the power, but conversely, they are definitely not the types to triple check their work. The power supply could have failed years ago when the building changed tenants. Maybe they never installed it, figuring they could get away with it. Or maybe the wires were non-functional. Who knows? Except there was an extremely easy way to test it. All we had to do was try to use the elevator on a different floor. If it worked, then it worked, and we could move forward. But if it didn't work, then we could try something else. We had all summer, so if there were failures, then we could keep trying. Once the floor was swept up and the debris thrown in the trash bags, I told KK my plan. I think we should head down to the 12th floor and try to use the elevator to get to the sub-basement. If it works, then we may have found the tower. If it doesn't work, then we might at least have a faster way downstairs. And even if there's no power, well, we won't be any worse off than we were before. Want to give it a try? I asked the Killer of Kemet, who shrugged. Sure, why not? Either it'll save us a lot of time or we lose a few minutes. Let's give it a try, she said as I eagerly led us down to the 12th floor. This was clearly built for the apartments. The stairwell led immediately to a long hallway, full of doors marked with numbers. The elevator was built into the wall. This one was also marked in graffiti, marking it as being the tower, the exact same design as what was on the 18th floor. So this only made me feel more confident that I was on the right track. At the elevator, KK and I pressed the button for down. The button lit up in red, and we heard deep in the building the machinery that was moving as the elevator creaked and groaned on the way up. I turned to KK and she turned to me. I smiled large and I couldn't stop smiling. I was right, and we were on the right track. The doors creaked open and the paint pulled apart, and we could see the inside of the elevator. There were a few incandescent bulbs inside of the elevator, lighting a grudging red interior. The walls, ceiling, and floor were all coated in red carpet. There were brass handles along the edges that were worn smooth by years of hand oil. In the flickering light, for a moment, I thought I saw a skeletal figure in the corner and the golden-eyed child with my face in the other corner, both grinning and gesturing me to get inside. But as the lights warmed up, I could see it was empty despite the musty smell. No one had been here for a long time. We entered the elevator and I saw the panel. Sure enough, there were 19 floors listed, 2 vertical rows of 9 buttons, with a single button in between the 2 rows on the bottom. It started at 18 on the top left and 17 on the top right, and went down, skipping over floor 13, and on the bottom left was the button for the first floor, and on the bottom right was B for basement. But beneath the 2 rows in between them was a button marked as -1. It wasn't uncommon for -1 to be seen in elevators that went deep underground, but a shiver ran up my spine when I saw that button, like I was going somewhere I wasn't supposed to. But I steeled myself and pressed the -1 button. The doors slid shut and the lights flickered when the elevator jostled. When the lights came off, for a moment, in the darkness, I saw every square centimeter of the elevator was coated in buttons. The walls, the doors, the ceiling, even the floor were all covered in buttons. Every single one of them red from being pushed and from being coated in blood. But then the lights brightened again, and I saw that it was just an elevator. with red carpet on the floors, walls, and ceilings. A strange place, but not the terror I saw just a moment ago. The elevator clunked and groaned as it continued to descend. "This isn't going to fall on us, is it?" KK asked, and I shook my head. Even if the canals above were torn apart, there's so many redundancies built in. We will descend to the nearest level and we will be let out. Okay, because it feels a lot deeper than 13 stories, she said. And I couldn't help but agree. Sure, the elevator was old, and I could hear the machinery strain, but still, we should be in the sub-basement by now. I looked up and I saw an old digital display. It must have been added after the elevator was built, but it was still working, but the numbers read didn't make any sense. It was in the -20s, and it was descending quickly. "Do you think the display is broken?" KK asked, and when she did, the lights flickered again, showing the many buttons of the elevator car again. A few of the ones on the wall were now dark, but there were still hundreds, or even thousands, left for the elevator to visit. "Did you see that?" I asked KK, and she nodded. "The tower is supposed to be below the lowest level." Oh, I said, as I finally understood. The golden-eyed child never said how far below the lowest level the tower was. And if the display, now reading -30, was a clue about anything, then it was far below the sub-basement. "Well, fuck. We have to stop this elevator," I said as I started trying all of the buttons I could see. Just in time for the lights to flicker again and the elevator return to normal. The panel had no emergency stop, no call button, not even an open or close button. Just the 19 buttons. Still, I tried pushing them all and nothing happened. The elevator continued to creak as it kept descending, now in the -40s, continuing deeper and deeper into the darkness. As I tried the buttons on the panel, KK tried to pry open the elevator doors. But no matter how her bandages wiggled or snaked, she was not able to fit anything through the doors. And the elevator descended further and further down. None of the buttons I tried did anything. They didn't even light up. "Maybe we should let it take us to the bottom? Then we can just press the button for the first floor?" KK offered, and I shook my head while I looked around the car in desperation. "No, that won't work. The emergency power supply for the elevator is designed to function for 90 minutes. We don't even know if we will reach the bottom wherever we are by the time the 90 minutes runs out. Every minute going down is 2 less minutes we have." "Wait, wouldn't it be 1 less minute? I don't have time to explain the math to you. The important part is we need to get this to stop and head back up before we get stuck on an internal elevator," I said, just as the lights flickered again. This time, it lasted longer. In the corner of the elevator, just in front of me, was the skeleton. I could see it wearing an old-fashioned elevator operator uniform. No flesh was left on the bones, and they were as yellow as sunflower petals. The jaws had many missing teeth, and the sockets were cast down like it was ashamed or upset. But it was the chains that was the most disturbing part. The skeleton's right arm was chained to the handle that controlled the elevator. It was pushed down and kept there. But that wasn't the only chain on the poor skeleton's body. Where the skeleton still stood was a red square marking it as a place not meant to be approached. The only place that didn't have buttons. Both of its ankles were chained to the red square, but around its neck was a chain that connected to its neck, pulling the skeleton's head forward. If the skeleton had flesh, the chain would have forced every deep breath to end in choking. And even in death, the skeleton didn't have enough slack to look up, nor even look at anyone in the eyes. The name tag, dimly visible in the light, didn't show a name, but showed a familiar symbol. The same symbol painted over the elevator doors. The tower. This skeleton was the remains of the tower. My goddess, what did they do to you? I said, reaching my hand out, stopping my hand just short of the zygomatic bone that was where the tower's cheek was. Whoever designed this prison for the tower wanted them to suffer. Their power is forced to be used every second of every day, not given any rest, not given a chance to heal, removed from death, removed from rebirth, and removed from life. Not even given the ability to look at those who imprisoned them. This wasn't cold cruelty. This wasn't a system that didn't care. Someone wanted this Arcana to suffer, and went out of their way to make them suffer. This wasn't meant to draw as much power as possible. This was made to make them suffer. Drawing power was secondary at best. We need to break them out. Their power is what's drawing us down, I told KK, who turned her efforts from the door to the skeleton. Her bandages whipped like angry snakes, but no matter how much she twisted or squeezed, she couldn't even rattle the chains. They were too heavy and durable for her to even move. I watched the Killer of Kemet lift hundreds of kilograms of steel with a single hand. Now, even with both of her hands, she couldn't even move a single chain link. I cannot move it. How do we get them out? KK asked, just as the lights flickered again, and the digital displays showed that we were over 100 floors down. The tower was missing. Both KK and I felt where they were, but we couldn't feel anything. So the cab was changing when the light changed. It wasn't an illusion. There has to be something we can do, KK said as she lifted her head up to the incandescent bulb. KK, don't do it, I said, just as she swung one of her bandages directly at the bulb, shattering it and leaving us in near total darkness. The only light was the ever-increasing digital numbers. I heard crunching and KK's apologies. In the low light, I saw no difference in the cab, and we either lost out our only warning system or our only way of changing the cab. You can move quickly without making brash decisions. Now, I need to figure something out, I told her as I tried not to let anger get into my voice. Logically, I knew she was trying to help, but that didn't change the fact that it may have made our situation much worse. But still, that gave me no excuse. Look, I'm sorry for snapping at you. We will need to find a way out, but in the future, let's think for a moment before taking action. That still doesn't excuse me for snapping at you, and for that, I'm sorry. Time spent thinking clearly is never time wasted, I told her as I closed my eyes and sat on the floor, letting my mind drift. This wasn't a problem I thought about before. Normally, I would be overwhelmed by emotions, but my mind was in a different gear. This was just a problem, and problems had solutions. If this was an Arcana's power that sank us down into the darkness, maybe another Arcana's power would get us out of this. I only had access to two of their powers, though. The Empress had some power, but none of that would help here, unless growing flowers or plants would stop us from descending. I chuckled at the thought, and I watched the numbers rise as we descended. No one really thought about how negative numbers were inverted from positive numbers, and how negative 150 was less than negative 100, even though 150 was usually bigger than 100. But life was funny like that. Context could change a victory to a defeat, a failure to a success, or a good decision into a bad decision. Wait, decisions. That thought process dredged up an expression I haven't thought about in a long time. There weren't good nor bad decisions, just decisions, and it was the consequences that were good or bad. I didn't actually believe in that since there were clearly good and bad decisions in life, but it did start a new thought process. Positive and negative numbers were both numbers. Sure, adding them to an equation changes the equation a lot, but if you don't understand the equation, then that is a good place to start. See how the numbers change the equation, and then you have a clearer picture of what the equation was. It was a very long shot, but I don't see how I could make the situation worse. Let me try something, I told KK, who was busy pushing on the walls with her bandages, trying to get them to pierce through. I slipped my hand into my pocket and pulled out one of the cards in my pocket. Even as I pulled it out, even though I couldn't see it, I could tell what it was from the way it felt. I knew it was the Hermit. I held the card in front of me and focused on the way the Hermit made me feel. Show me, I whispered to the card, and a lantern began to glow where the incandescent bulb hung only a moment ago. The Hermit's lantern, which, in addition to showing us what was around us, also had the ability to show us things from a more introspective perspective. It was a long shot, but it seemed like it may work. And it did. I could see the tower's skeleton, and I approached it. I had no tools, no powers, and I was certain neither of my Arcana cards could break the chains made to contain them. Still, though, I approached. I could smell dust instead of breath, and the chains smelled of rust and hopelessness. But still, I approached. Even when I heard KK call out, I still approached the skeleton. My hands felt guided by themselves as I grabbed at the shackles, and with a simple squeeze of my hand, it crumbled into dust. The metal was weaker than dried leaves in my hands, but only in my hands. Not understanding why, but understanding my next roll, I broke the shackle around her neck and then legs. And when the last of it crumbled into rust and dust, I looked up into the skeleton's sockets. Even though I could see nothing, I felt like they were saying thank you to me. You are released. Return to reincarnation, rebirth, and resurrection, I told the tower, as it too crumbled into yellow dust, leaving only the tower Arcana card behind. I picked it up and dusted it off. The card felt weak, but also felt like it had a chance to heal and strengthen again. What do we do now? KK asked as I stood up and faced the elevator doors. I lifted my hand in a stop sign and the numbers stopped changing. I could now call upon the tower's power as my own. This power is mine now. Now, I believe a deal is a deal. Do you need the Emperor's personal chambers? I asked, and then pointed at a button on the wall, one that glowed, waiting to be pressed. You can take me to the Emperor's chambers. Right now? KK asked, and I nodded. The deal was a deal, and I intended to keep mine. Is this the only time you can do this, or can you also do it at a later time? She asked me. I can send you there at a later time too, but I thought you wanted your revenge. I asked her, and KK sighed. Just because I'm not killing him now doesn't mean I forgive him. But now I can access him at any time. I don't think. I think I'm going to spend some time planning it through, she said. I stared at her mystified before I nodded. I think that's a wonderful idea, KK. There's a lot more power we can collect, and a lot we can learn about ourselves first. Now, let's get back to the first floor, I said, pushing a different button as it led us up to the first floor. When the elevator doors opened, we came face to mask with Mr. Mad. He stared at us, and while I was thankful my card was put away, I realized how it looked. Turns out the elevator has power, I said, hoping to diffuse the situation. The drive to Strophia Stadium took a long time. Everyone's jobs at the tower were paused, and both KK and I were separated. My own personal cell on the bus was dark, and my right hand was chained to the wall. My phone was taken, and I was kept in the dark. Mr. Mad was quite upset. So he decided to make an example of me in front of the entire academy. There would be a fight in front of the entire school in the stadium. The point was to show all the students that the teachers were in charge, and it was because the teachers were so much more powerful than the students. Supposedly, if a student was able to defeat a teacher, it showed that the student was in the right. Honestly, to me, it felt like bullying through and through. Children asked to fight a teacher in front of the school was definitely something I was meant to lose. Normally, I would have been scared, but now I only focused on what was in front of me. I knew Mr. Mad was an accomplished fighter, stronger than a Tippecam, and he enjoyed setting an example. He wouldn't just beat me in a fight, he was going to drag it on and make it last. Supposedly the games were meant to end the moment one or the other was no longer able to fight. But Mr. Mad was still known for keeping a fight going, even after bone was showing and the person was barely breathing. But I did have an advantage. Mr. Mad didn't know what I could do. Everyone in the school, with the exception of KK, thought I was Tippecam, an exoteric or powerless human being. Still, though, I had to try it if I was going to succeed. I leaned back and looked up at the ceiling. KK was separated from me, and Mr. Mad said it was because I was the only one who did anything wrong. So she was asked to leave, and even without any eyes, I could tell she was judging her ability to fight and whether or not it was still going to be worth the inevitable consequences. But she saw one look from my face, and she refused. I had an idea, and it was all I could do. But I knew why Mr. Mad refused to include KK in the wrongdoing. He didn't want to lose to KK. So if he kept it this way, then he looks magnanimous, but he also doesn't look weak by avoiding me. Still, though, I wondered deep in my heart, who did that fool? Well, whoever it fooled, Mr. Mad cared enough about their opinions to fool them. When we arrived, I was let out of the bus, and I was escorted out by 4 guards, 2 in front and 2 behind. They were large and dressed in black armor. As they escorted me off the bus, the 2 guards in front went to my sides as they escorted me forward. There was no risk of me running forward at this point. The first room I was escorted to was the quartermaster. The guards locked the metal door behind me. It was built like a bank vault. These rooms were built to hold in kids like Troll Lord. Little high priest like me? No chance. Before me, in an iron cage, was the quartermaster, an old man with red eyes and a cutting voice. "What weapons do you desire?" "No guns, no explosives," he said, as there were rows of weapons behind him. Most of them were blades, clubs, and similar hand weapons. If you didn't see your weapon, you could request it, but there was no guarantee the quartermaster would get it for you. There were a lot of traditions in these weapon choices, hence why guns and explosives were not included. Not that guns or explosives were guaranteed to do any better against the teachers. Most, if not all, of the teachers were experts in villainy, and bullets didn't faze them. Still, though, I asked the quartermaster if he had what I wanted. After he heard my request, he nodded and withdrew a slingshot with steel ball bearings. The kind of slingshot that attaches to the wrist so it doesn't aim poorly. The pulling back power was strong enough to not just shoot your eye out, but to crack a skull. A lot of people think of slingshots as toys you give to pioneer scouts. They tend to forget about what David did with a sling. "You sure this is what you want?" he asked, and I nodded. This would be perfect, partially because of a tactical reason I wasn't disclosing to him, but mostly because of the naming significance. "If you say so, but I have real weapons as well," he said as he handed me the slingshot. I checked the compartment, and there were plenty of ball bearings, and I had a plan. The door across the way opened, and I entered it. The waiting room. It looked a lot like every other waiting room in the world, but instead of magazines, there were pamphlets for local hospitals and bags of raw peanuts. Yeah, they knew what the people waiting in this room were going to need. I grabbed a bag to eat, and the other bag I put into my pocket while I watched the screen. On the television screen, the master of ceremonies spoke. He wore a white suit with a white tie, and on his head was a white motorcycle helmet with the glass tinted white to match the rest of his ensemble. "Welcome, welcome, welcome to Strophius Stadium. We have a special trial by combat today. The accuser, Mr. Mad, accuses the High Priest of sabotaging his class's efforts for cleaning Temperance Tower. He has cited 1 disappearance, 2 hospital injuries, and the fact the High Priest was found alone in the elevator as proof. So he has challenged the High Priest to trial by combat. The accused, High Priest, states that he didn't hurt anyone, and he just pushed a button on the elevator, and that everything else that happened wasn't his nor anyone else's fault, with the exception of the cleaning company. But we aren't here to judge them by the strength of their arguments. No, we are judging them by their true strength." Mr. Mad has won over 20 trials in the stadium, one of the top 5 of any staff in Strophius Stadium. His known abilities include Herculean strength and even greater durability. He has no known weaknesses. In his professional life, he has been known to overpower bears, sharks, and even mammoths. He has a brilliant mind that is able to examine a situation from all angles, even as he is in the situation. There's a reason he's the head of the Economica department. Odds for him are very good. At that last line, the camera turned to the arena, and out stepped Mr. Mad. Mr. Mad removed his suit, and he was now bare-chested, showing his tattoos of eagles and sharks on his chest. In his right hand he wielded a 2-meter long sword that was meant to be wielded by 2 hands. A dull sword, but one that I knew was going to hurt, because 10 kilograms of steel swung at my chest was going to break every rib. The arena had an entirely dirt floor with no obstacles, no weapons, and no tools. Nothing that I was supposed to use to my advantage. That wasn't true of every fight. Sometimes they would have weapons or places to run through. Since Mr. Mad was the accuser, he had the right to choose the battlefield, and he chose somewhere he thought I had no advantage. Unfortunately for him, just because I was quiet and I preferred avoiding the fight, didn't mean I couldn't think tactically nor strategically. I smiled as I saw Mr. Mad turn to the cheering crowd and waved his sword in arms as he tried to get the crowd riled up. Even if the tactician, our master of ceremonies, was being honest about Mr. Mad's strength and intelligence, he was wrong about one big thing. Mr. Mad had a known weakness, at least known to me. Mr. Mad continued to pose for the crowd past the point where it got uncomfortable, and the door leading to the stadium opened for me. Hanging from the wall was a single device similar to a Bluetooth phone. It would allow us to speak to the crowd and be heard. It was theatrical, but necessary. I stood in the darkness of the doorway leading to the arena. A small red electronic sign told me to wait while the tactician made color commentary about me. In the other corner, we have the High Priest, a first-year student at Agamemnon's academy. No victories under his belt, no known powers, no known skills, and a GPA of 3.2 with a near failing grade in Mr. Mad's class. So hey, if you win this, you'll get an easy A, kid, the tactician joked, which caused a wave of laughter from the audience. A way of easing tension and distracting people from the fact it's meant to be my slaughter. But who knows, maybe this underdog pup might have a few surprises. That might shake things up. There's been a few times where first-year students have won. The comment brought a few murmurs from the audience, mostly among the student body. Those victories from students were so rare, everyone knew about them. But the last one was from over 3 years ago, and no one was counting on me to win. But the conditions were yet to be set. The rules of the arena: avoid lethal blows where possible. Anything you carry into the arena you may use, and anything in the arena can be used as a weapon. A win can be captured in one of 3 ways. 1. Either combatant being unable to continue fighting for any reason is a win for the other combatant. In the event of both combatants being unable to continue fighting, it is declared a draw. 2. If either combatant yields for any reason, the other will win, if they accept the yield. If a combatant refuses to accept the other's surrender, The fight will continue until a combatant is unable to keep fighting. 3. If a combatant leaves or is forced to leave the arena, it is declared a victory for the remaining combatant. And of course, have fun and make it entertaining. The entire school is watching. The tactician finished as the lights dimmed in the seats. Silence fell across the arena, and I heard a beep in my Bluetooth before the countdown began. 5. I could see that Mr. Mad gripped his sword in excitement. Even through his mask, I could imagine he was smiling. 4. The number flashed across the screens around the arena, and I became aware of the sweat on my palms. I wiped my hands on my shirt. I had to be cautious. If Mr. Mad was going to make the crowd love him, I would make them hate him. 3. I gauged where the cards were in my pocket. The tower's power was still returning, but it wasn't as strong as I wanted it to be. I could open one path, but I would have to make it count. And make it count, I would. It was my ace, and people tend to play the ace right away, regardless of situation. Few ever thought about the fact that there's situations where an ace could be played better, or in situations where it was worthless. 2. That number flashed, and despite myself, I found myself holding my breath. I had thought about this moment a lot. I wanted to get back at Mr. Mad. I was full of so much anger about how he treated me and my classmates. But now wasn't the time to be angry. Now was the time to be victorious. 1. The number burned on the screens, and the crowd said it with the number. I reached into my pocket and broke open the bag of raw peanuts. The kind that were still alive and could grow if planted in soil. Mr. Mad didn't notice what I was holding. He was focused on my face. Good. Then he wouldn't see what I was going to do. Go! Rang through the stadium, and I grabbed a handful of the peanuts and I threw them towards Mr. Mad. But a single shell I put in my slingshot. I pulled it back and fired it all in one smooth motion, quicker than Mr. Mad could react. The peanut struck across his mask and broke, leaving the nuts on the ground at first. Mr. Mad was about to react in anger until he saw what I shot him with. And then he began to laugh. Looks like the high priest launched the first blow. A single shot of a single peanut shell. Mr. Mad has no peanut allergy, so I'm afraid it does no damage, the tactician said, and laughter ran across the stadium and from Mr. Mad. Now amused, he opened his arms out wide, inviting a shot, thinking I had nothing else to shoot at him. I smoothly put a steel ball bearing into the pouch as I pulled it back and fired it again, directly at his forehead. He didn't even try to react as the ball bearing cracked his mask and snapped his head back. Mr. Mad held a hand up to his face, and when he pulled it away, it drew blood, and his mask was clearly cracked, revealing the skin underneath. I stand corrected. The high priest has both launched the first blow and drawn first blood. A first year drawing first blood is quite unexpected, the tactician said, while Mr. Mad focused on me. I held out my left hand towards him and I spoke through my headset. Mr. Mad, please, we don't have to fight. You started this and you can still end it before it gets ugly. I told him, and I heard boos from the seats, especially from the staff section. No one wanted a fight that ended too soon, and someone who gave up after drawing first blood was a prime example of cowardice in their eyes. Are you offering me your surrender? Sorry, little priest, but I don't accept your surrender, he said, his voice booming across the stadium. I kept my left hand out to him, part of my mind focusing on that, while the rest of my mind focused on this next part. All the cameras were aimed at my face, and I looked up, giving a wide smile that showed only madness and cruelty. An act, but one I knew how to do well. It was like a customer service smile, but with leaning forward, and the cameras showed everyone in the entire stadium the madness I was keeping hidden from them. You misunderstand, Mr. Mad. I'm not offering you my surrender. I am demanding yours, I said to the audience that was now cheering far louder for me than they did for him. Even though he wasn't trying to let it bother him, I could see he hated the fact they weren't cheering for him. Big words from a little guy. Show me what you got, he said, picking up his sword and eager to swing it. That was adorable. He wanted it to draw me towards him, and he thought he could bait me. I aimed my next slingshot for his cheek, and I cracked his mask again before he had a chance to react. A few broken pieces fell down along with his drops of blood into the brown dirt of Strophius Stadium. Next one goes through both of your eyes, and I can do this all day. Can you? I told him. My trap was already set. Mr. Mad charged forward, eyes closed as he ran towards me, and I ran towards him as well, ducking beneath his blade and making sure I ran past his right side. And when he realized he missed me, he reopened his eyes and turned to me. He stood where I stood only a moment ago. You're a powerless coward who resorts to cheap tricks to win, and you wonder why everyone hates you. In the light of true strength, everyone will see that I am right and that you were wrong. Just like always. No wonder your father abandoned you here, Mr. Mad said, trying to taunt me. He was certain words were going to hurt, and I'm sure in a way it did. But I could put things in boxes and deal with them in my own time. And besides, nothing he could say could be more cruel than what I said to myself every day. Tick, tick, boom, I responded, ending it with a snap, and a hole opened directly beneath Mr. Mad, pulling him inside and then dragging in soil to bury him. Dug by the roots of peanut plants, I grew with the power of the Empress. That I commanded, also with the power of the Empress. When people think about plant threats, they think about what they see above ground. They don't think about the root system underneath, which can be many times larger than what you do see. I let out a sigh with the thought that I had captured Mr. Mad with both dirt and roots. Shocked silence shook the Strophius Stadium as I spoke. Mr. Mad is now captured and underground. He is no longer able to fight. I believe that makes me a victor? I asked, only for the tactician to respond. High Priest, that isn't a knockout. I'm afraid you only just started round 2, he said as I felt vibrations underneath my feet. Somehow Mr. Mad was still moving around, and I was certain he was going to get out. Quickly I ran to the other side of the arena, in just enough time for Mr. Mad to burst out of the ground. He was dirty, angry, and hacking up dirt clods, but he was still in fighting shape. Die! He yelled as he charged towards me. I was out of peanuts, and there were no plants nearby I could use. So quickly I turned to the power of the hermit. It would grant me introspection and the ability to see the right way out of a problem. so it gave me the wisdom to dodge Mr. Mad's furious blows. But even as I ducked and weaved and avoided both his sword and his hands, I knew I couldn't do it forever. Knowing what to do to avoid being hit is one thing. Having the endurance to keep dodging indefinitely was something else entirely. Already I was getting tired, and Mr. Mad wasn't at all tired. Quickly, I had a thought, and I used another one of the hermit's abilities when he had me cornered against the wall. A flash of bright light exploded from across my body, blinding Mr. Mad yet again as he wildly swung his sword. The sword, even dull, tore out gouges of concrete from the wall. In that split moment, I focused on the power of the Empress and made sure it was in my hand as I punched him in the gut as I ran by. He barely felt it, but I felt like I just punched a wall. Still, after running about 10 meters away, I focused on the Empress's power, while his eyes cleared and he found me again. "What are you doing? Trying to grow a dandelion to fight me? Fight your own battles," he yelled at me. But I held my hand out to him like I did before. I didn't have to do this for long, but it had to be well timed. "Is your stomach okay?" I asked him, and he laughed. "Sorry, did you punch it? I thought a bit of dust hit me there," he said with a laugh that was shared with the staff of the stadium, but not the students. I wonder if he ever noticed or if he even cared. The power of the Empress gave me power over things that grew, mostly plants, but also fungi and bacteria. Even if it is beneficial, however, you can have too much of a good thing. So I could accelerate the growth of plants, fungi, and bacteria, but I would need to have had physical contact with them, even if it was just for a moment. Hence why I needed to throw the peanuts. But a fact people tend to forget is your body is full of microscopic life. Life I could command. All I needed was a touch. "Thrive," I said with a wicked smile, and Mr. Mad collapsed to the ground, screaming in pain as the pain of his stomach being digested and the surrounding tissue was being eaten into. His small scratches across his body grew infected before everyone's eyes, and he screamed in pain as I took a step closer, my hand still out to him. "Yield and I will stop it," I told him. A murmur rippled across the students' part of the stadium. No matter how strong Mr. Mad was, he couldn't survive his body turning on itself. An infection could stop armies and shatter nations. "Never. I would rather die." He turned to face me, and I pulled back my slingshot and fired a ball bearing. It bounced against his right eye before bouncing against the ground and hitting his left eye. "I'll make this simple, Mr. Mad. Your body is picking up new infections far faster than your immune system can fight back. Even simple bacteria are a threat to you. Both of your eyes have been injured. How many fungi and bacteria live in the soil? Do you know? How long do you think your eyes can handle this before they have to be removed? I wonder if the infection will reach your brain," I said with my cruelty showing. Mr. Mad, still in pain, took his hands off his eyes and laid them both on the ground, palms down, a show of surrender. "Oh, looks like we have a victor. The high priest has won the trial by combat," the tactician said, clearly not expecting me to win. I stood, my hands shaking imperceptibly as cheers rang through the stadium. I looked around and I saw that the students were cheering for me like I won the Great War single-handedly. The teachers I could see were clapping politely, but I knew the message I sent. The staff wanted to show themselves as superior and always in the right. So, when one of their strongest battled against someone they saw as one of our weakest, and they lost, well, they won't forget it so quickly. But with victory in hand, all I can think of was one thing. I have won, and now I am going back to my room. Thank you, I said with a bow, which only drew another big cheer. I dropped the slingshot and the Bluetooth before I held out my right hand, and I made a movement like opening a door, and I stepped through the air. I entered my hotel room, and KK sat on her bed looking at the TV, which was streaming the fight. She saw me and she asked, "Are you okay?" I collapsed to my knees at that question, and I started crying. I didn't know where all that cruelty came to me. I care about everyone, and I didn't even have a rude thing to say. But in that arena, the only thought I had was how to hurt him more. I didn't keep him alive out of mercy. I kept him alive because I knew I could cause him more pain later. There was a thrill in seeing him squirm at my feet. There was joy in the cheers for blood and knowing I was the reason. The spotlight was addictive, and I wanted more. But that all scared me so much. It was so much like my father. I wasn't aware at first that I was being held by KK. Her bandages were soft and warm, and I was squeezed softly. You were defending yourself. You asked him to stop. He didn't. You had to force him to stop. It's hard, but even if it felt good, doesn't mean you have to let it define you. You choose how you define yourself, she said, and as my tears slowed, I pulled away and I saw what was laid on my bed. Did you get that for me? I asked her, and she shook her head. No, it was there when I got here. On the bed was a black dress. It was elegant with pockets in the side that was the right size to hold the Arcana. The exact same dress worn by the golden-eyed child. Made in my size. I stared at it for a moment. Different tears filled my eyes as KK spoke up. Why don't you try it on? She asked. I picked up the dress, worried what she would say, but by looking at her blank face and warm pose, I felt safe around her. Okay, let me give it a try, I said as I began to take it to the bathroom to change. I have a few dresses packed that might fit you if you want to try those too, KK offered as I went to the bathroom to change. The memory of what happened in Strophius Stadium was still fresh, but now I had something else to do. I could process it safely and slowly. I cried alone in the bathroom as I got dressed. If you asked me, I couldn't tell you if it was because of the dress or because of what I did.